Play old Cindy now on the banjo. These old men taught me to pick. Some of them was 90-year-old when I was 8 or 9 years old and started me out playing the old claw hammer. And I never would play no other way. I just let the picks go and played the old time way. Play old Cindy now. Get along home, home, Cindy, rains and oh, Cindy in the summertime, Cindy in the fall, won't be Cindy all the time, won't be Cindy at all. Get along home, home, Cindy, get along home. Get along home, home, Cindy, there ain't no time.
How you?
Hello, cousin. How are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Doing great.
Now you kindly tell me who you are.
All right. Johnny One Arm Noble
All right.
is my great grandfather.
Okay.
He had a son, Isabel McIntosh, had a son, James Noble.
Yes, sir. He died on the railroad up the line. He was working.
James Noble with Charity Merle.
Who did he marry? James Noble?
He married Charity Merle.
Yeah.
And they had my great grandfather, Hubert Noble.
I know who Hubert is mighty well. My grandmother was Regina.
Okay.
Johnny One Arm Johnny's daughter.
Yes, she married Simon.
She married Simon. Later on, she married Teet Hurl. He also got killed. Teet did. And then she married Owsley Reynolds. And then the last marriage, she married Forrester Robinson.
Wow, let me get a pencil or paper so I can take this down. Because I only have the one marriage.
Okay, Simon. Oh, she was married. She married after Simon.
So she married Simon first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then she married Teet Hurl. Teete, I believe it's spelled Teet Hurl.
How do you spell the last name?
Hearald, Hurl.
G-A-R-A-L-D, okay.
Yeah. He also was killed. A guy named Carl Little killed him, beat him to death with a stick. They were all drunk playing poker and got into a fight, and Carl killed him.
Wow.
And Teet Hurl, is buried at the Haley Sandlin Cemetery. Haley, H-A-L-E-Y. Haley Sandlin, S-A-N-D-L-I-A-N, Sandlin.
Okay. Did you have a birthday?
Now, Teet was married before he married Regina. He had a family before he married her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hubert married Dorothy Holland.
Yeah, I've heard them talk about her. Now let me.
James died so young. Charity left, and James was pretty much raised by his grandparents, Larkin and Mary Merle.
Yeah, he's Hubert is buried. James is buried where I took the picture of John Noble's grave. He's buried in that cemetery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen one photo of his tombstone on Find a Grave, I think.
Yeah. Now, do you know how Johnny got his arm off?
No, I was going to ask that.
All right, I'm going to tell you. Johnny was very cruel to his wife, Ibby. That is her great. He was cruel to her, and one day, Wes McIntosh came along. That was Ibby's brother, Wes McIntosh, Wesley. And Johnny and Ibby were fighting, and he was beating Ibby up, and Wes told him, he said, "Don't hit her again, Johnny. Don't hit my sister." Johnny hit her again, and he blowed Johnny's arm off.
Wow.
Wes McIntosh, Johnny's wife's brother. And now let me tell you, back those days, they didn't have no doctors much. And they had almost killed him. I guess he about bled to death. And they put him in a bed, and they put a bucket up to the ceiling. They drove a steeple in the loft and run a string through there and tied it to that bucket. And they punched just a pinhole in that bucket. About every 5 minutes, it would drip on that stub. Carbolic acid is what they used. And I don't know if they weakened it down or what, but he laid with his arm out on a cloth, and that carbolic acid come down on his arm, and that kept the gangrene out, or that's what they said, and he almost died. Johnny did. He got so poor he just couldn't hardly eat. Almost they sit up with him night after night. And that's how his arm got shot off. Wes McIntosh, Ibby's brother.
Wow. They had hydraulic acid dripping on the wound?
Carbolic acid. Down with water, or I don't know, but they might have just been pure carbolic acid. It would drip about every 5 minutes. They punctured the bottom of the bucket, And, yeah.
Wow.
Now that's a bad. And I talked about the fight my dad had in Wayne the day before he killed Johnny. They crossed the hill out of Breathitt County, my daddy did, and Wayne, his brother. And they got down there and they got into it with them boys of Johnny's. That was their uncles,
Yeah.
And Wayne was married, my dad wasn't married. And the awfulest fight, I reckon, my daddy said he'd never seen anything like it. He said Sherman had wooden nooks, made like steel nooks, to go over your hand. And he said Sherman was beating him to death. And he said he got his foot on a rock. My dad did. And he said he hit Johnny right above the ear with that rock. And he said when Johnny fell, said Ibby hollered, said, "Lord, they've killed John." Johnny's boys all went over top of him to see if he was killed, I guess, and they got away. They run off, my daddy and Wayne. They were beat to death. So they wasn't going to tell their dad about the fight, and they just went back to Breathitt County over where Wayne lived, and somebody went, and I know who it, Orrin Nobles, the man went and told Simon, said, "Johnny's boys beat your boys up." And he went in home and he told Regina, he said, "I'm going to kill your daddy." She said, "Simon, don't kill my poor old daddy." He said, "I'm going to kill him." And up the road he went. And then the rest of the story is on the video. Do what now?
Who were your parents?
My parents was Dillard McIntosh and May Morris McIntosh. And
Dillard McIntosh?
Uh-huh. Son of Simon and Regina.
And your mother's name was?
May Morris, Morris. McIntosh. She married Dillard, right, my dad. And
Okay.
I was 4 months old, and my grandpa took me in, him and my grandma, and raised me. She was my step-grandmother, really. But they raised me from 4 months old. I never knew any other dad and mother but my grandpa and grandma. And they were very, very interesting people, both of them. Hard-working, good, God-fearing people. Here at Lerose, Kentucky, across the road here, you can see this field. That's where the KP Lumber Company had their sawmill. They come in here and bought all this timber off of these roses and so on, and they built a tram road right up this, right here, 708, all the way to Taligi. And they haul this lumber out of here from this sawmill. And right there, Lester Campbell's dad, John M. Campbell, had a big store. Later on, Lester had a store, post office too. Right there where that mill sits near that, they had a fight one day, a bad one. Clint Caudle and Wiley Bolin killed each other. Wiley shot Clint Caudle down and he fell. And Clint come with his gun and shot from the ground and killed Bolin. And also, the same time, John Estep killed Tom Wilson. Tom was the son of old jailer Rob Wilson in Boonville. Tom slapped a boy. He was alone. Claimed he cussed in front of his house and disturbed him. And when he slapped that boy, John Estep killed him. John Estep was the son of Jim Estep. Jim Estep was an old carpenter in this county. Jim Estep and Joe Estep were brothers. Joe Estep was Sam Estep's father. Many of you remember Sam Estep. And that was a bad fight right here. And that KP Lumber was a big outfit. It went all the way. Now they had a donkey train pull that lumber. And they got the coal in the head right up here in the head of the Wilson Fork. Where you go over to Lyman's Creek, there was a coal mine there, and that's where they mined their coal to power the donkey. So this is kind of a little story about what was going on back in them times. Right up this creek right here where I'm looking, my grandma had a brother killed. His name was Ap Merle. Alfred was his name. They called him Ap for short.
Pat Holland shot him. Him and Pat was drunk. Pat had his arm around App's neck and shot him in the back of the head with a .38 special. The bullet didn't come out his forehead. Dr. Anderson and Dr. Glass had an office in the courthouse at that time. They took App's body there and sawed his head open and got the bullet out for evidence. And they couldn't get all of his brains back in his head. My grandmother, App was her brother, she gave him a small vase. They put his brains down in that vase, a stone vase, and put a cloth over him, put them right between his feet in the casket. And I always wondered if they ever exhumed his body, what they'd think about the vase being in between his feet. I'm sitting in front of the old Owsley County Stockyard. It was run by Willard Camel. When I was a young man, I come here practically every Wednesday. And you wouldn't believe the stock was in Owsley County at that time. Cows, pigs, mules, horses. This is where everybody comes. And I saw from Highway 30 up there, I saw the trucks loaded with cattle and hogs almost down to the mouth of Sugar Camp. And pin hookers was here. We'll talk about the pin hookers. They would swing on the side of them trucks and look in at their cattle and stuff, and they'd buy them before they got in the sale. They'd buy them and then they'd resell them when they started selling cattle and stuff. And I've seen different times they'd be selling here at dark. There would be that many people here with all the cattle and hogs and mules. Down here where they had their mules, they had a rock, they had a chain on that rock, and they'd pull that rock around with their mules, show how good they'd pull. And also we had a little entertainment here sometimes. Smiley would come and Peg Leg Sam. He was a black man, and he was a harp player. He's on the YouTube if anybody wants to see him. And when I was a boy, I'd hang around with Sam, and he had a platform. It was about as wide as that stick and about as long. It had legs on it. He'd get up on that platform and perform. And he had a PA system, well, one speaker and a mic. And he was about as good a harp player as I ever heard play. And I took up with him, and I'd go in the restaurant and get him a bottle of water before he'd start playing, and he'd always pour that harp, water in that harp, and clean it out, knock it out on a handkerchief. One day I asked him, I said, "How do you get a sound like that out of that harp?" He said, "I cross-key." I said, "I don't understand." He said, "You take a G harp, you make a D. You take a A harp, you make a E." And he said, "You play a drawing lick instead of a blowing." The blowing lick was the old-time style, and the way he played was the blues style. And I learned it from Peg Leg Sam, and that's the way I play. One day, he wasn't here. The next Wednesday, and several Wednesdays, he wasn't here, and he finally come back. And he had a scar right up the side of his head, right there. And I said, "Sam, what's wrong?" He said, "I let a gun off and shot myself." That's what he said. "I let a gun off and shot myself." He was a good entertainer, and he could dance with that peg leg. You wouldn't believe how that man could dance. I listened to him very closely, and I very much enjoyed Peg Leg Sam. There'll be a lot of people see this that will know him and remember him. Now, before this stock sale was here, all the trading took place down in Boonville, down by the jail. It's called Jockey Street. That's where everybody comes to trade. They traded horses and mules. I don't know about cattle. If they had any, I don't think they did. It's a mule trade and a horse trade. And of course, they had plenty of good moonshine whiskey. That was a good place to come and bootleg. That was a big day, Jockey Street. And I think it was the first Monday in every month, if I'm not mistaken, they had Jockey Street. That's when they had court. They had court day that day. So that was before this place here. I'll tell you about Peg Leg Sam, the medicine show man over at the Owsley County Stockyard. He taught me how to play the cross key on the harp. And I'm playing a harp that's in the key of C. But on the guitar in standard tuning, it would be a G on the guitar. Instead of, you draw. Rabbit skipped and a rabbit hopped. Rabbit bit my turnip top. Well, I'll be dogged if I can see how my little honey got away from me. That's the way it goes now when you're playing cross key.